Good evening, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Sunday Night Live with me, Jonny Lipsham, here at jonnylipshamstudios.co.uk. I hope everybody is doing well and has had a great weekend so far. Been a good one here for me. It's been a busy one, but it's been a good weekend. So I'm very happy. I'm very relaxed, and I'm feeling a wee bit better. I'm not 100% fit yet, but I'm definitely better than I was this morning. This morning I had no voice at all, so we're doing much better by the fact that I am able to speak, albeit very quietly. I kind of have a bit more, I've obviously had a lot of empathy and a lot of sympathy for Jonny Gibe and his voice issues over the years, but yeah, I'm kind of experiencing maybe a teeny wee bit of what it's like for him on a daily basis at the moment. So yeah, I'm having to talk very quietly into a very, very compressed and limited microphone so that you guys can hear me. But yeah, that's kind of the story here. So I have to save my voice because I've got some concerts coming up before New Year's. So and I need my voice for those. So that's kind of that story here. So welcome everybody. Let's go see who we have here. Billy Morgan has reclaimed his place as first in the door, followed by Chris Manrakna. He's here as well. Sean Aaron is here. Ron Figure is here. Christina was here. I don't anticipate that she might be now, because it'd be like 1 o'clock in the morning for her, so she probably is not, and she'll maybe catch the replay. So hello to you, Christina, watching the replay. John Hawk is here. Tony Stringer is here. Dave Barcelo is here. Daryl Harrison is here as well. And we got Kyle Draduziak and Bobby Booth, without whom no show is complete. And we got Spin 180, that's my good friend Mark. Hello to you, my friend, and Dave from Bob's New York is also here as well. Welcome, my friend. Good to see you. It's been a wee while. I'm glad you're here. Neil Thompson is also here. And you guys are talking about violence to the like button. Please do commit random acts of common law assault on the like button, please. It helps me a lot. I like to have like parity between number of viewers and number of likes. So if we've got like 25 people watching, let's get 25 likes. That would be awesome. So that's kind of what I like. And we got Chappie from the Lockdown Band, which is cool. Who else do we have that I'm missing out? Let's see. We got Don Oliver here as well, and John Hathwaite down in England is here as well. And I think that's all we have so far. Neil says, so had the show happened this morning, it would have been a really quiet one. Had the show happened this morning, there would be no voice. You would have heard nothing. It would have been a whisper. And right now it's kind of just a wee bit above a whisper. So, yes, that's kind of where we are at the moment. So, I do have a wee talking point for this week, mostly because I have actually thought of one, and I've been having a discussion with a few people, and there have been quite a few social media posts where people have mentioned this. So I wanted to have a wee rant, just a wee one, okay? And it's on the subject of this word. Excuse me, I nearly burped. On this subject of, well, it's a word really, workflow. Because I think it is a word that is much abused. And so I want to kind of address my wee pet peeve with that word, and also how I think it is being abused, and how we'd be better served finding another word for it or not using that term at all. Here's the thing that I have a problem with. It's made up of two words, work and flow. I have no problem with these two words. The problem I have with it is that the way that it is thought of these days is it's something that is immovable and inflexible and cannot be changed. And therefore, software applications must change to accommodate workflow. And this is what perplexes me about it. Is the word flow suggests something that is moving, something that is constantly changing and developing and growing. And work is self-explanatory, but it's the word flow bit that I find really perplexing in how it's being used here. I've seen a number of posts where somebody has said, oh, it'd be great if we had X, Y, and Z in my DAW because, you know, the fact that we don't is a workflow killer, or it toasts my workflow, or something like that. I'm just like, okay, so your workflow doesn't actually flow then. Because if it's fixed and cannot be changed, and you have a fixed set way of doing things in music making, then it's not really a flow, is it? It's a fixed process that you go through to make music. And so I'm thinking to myself, on one level, it's creative because you're still making something, you're still making music. But on another level, it's not really very creative if it's static and it doesn't change. You habitually go through the same processes over and over again to make a piece of music. And it doesn't flow in that sense. It's fixed. And so for people that are like that, their expectation is that technology will kind of morph to suit their workflow rather than the other way round. Rather than technology is a tool to enable us to flow through our work process, how we actually make music from start to finish. So for me, workflow should be something that is flexible, movable, malleable, changeable. As we get better, as technology gets better. But it should never be impinged by technology. Technology should not stop you being creative. It should not stop you making music. So there should be no status at all by which technology is a workflow killer, in my opinion. Yes, there may be stumbling blocks because technology has not quite developed in the way that you would like yet to be able to do the thing that you want to do. You know, if you're really, really, really on the cutting edge like that, and you're really on the cutting edge of technology, and you're on the cutting edge of music creation within that cutting edge of technology, and then, yeah, I can see why, you know, you might be hitting these stumbling blocks, but most people are not doing that. Most people are not there. Most people are not at that cutting edge. They might think they are, but they're not. They're not at that cutting edge. And so really, when they say, oh, this thing has killed my workflow, it's killed my mojo, it's killed whatever, insert mumbo jumbo word. No. You've just found an excuse to stop you from making music. You've just found an excuse whereby you can't achieve what you want to achieve. That is a different thing. So I've seen a whole bunch of posts just recently on Facebook, in the Persona Studio One group and a few other places, and also on the forum where people have said, oh, this thing is a workflow killer, or this thing toasts my workflow. This thing stops me creating altogether. I'm just like, why? I mean, it shouldn't. We're creative people. Therefore, if we are creative people, if we are truly creative people, we should be able to find creative solutions to problems. Yes, sometimes the technology can get in the way, but when technology gets in the way, what do? We innovate. We invent a solution to the problem so that we can keep creating. You know, so if there is a feature that is missing from Studio One, or you think is missing from Studio One, that doesn't do, or Studio One doesn't do what you think you need it to do in order for you to make music in your particular niche, then find a solution. Create a solution with what Studio One currently does. Then you are being creative, and then, yes, your work flows. If something in the technology stops you from being creative, and instead of working out a solution to the problem, you go running over to Facebook or Twitter or somewhere else to basically say, oh, this thing is a workflow killer, you've just spent the time and the creative energy that you could have put into finding a solution, finding a workaround, creating a workaround, to expending that energy on social media. But when you go back to Studio One, the problem is still there and you haven't fixed it. So workflow, in my opinion, and feel free to debate in the chat, because that's what this show is for. Feel free to debate. Feel free to give me a counter argument to this point. Because I welcome it. But let's keep it polite, let's keep it kind, let's keep it respectful. If you're going to be rude or obnoxious, my moderators will ping you out. They'll either put you on timeout until you can learn to be nice, or you'll get booted permanently. Depends on how rude you are. But for the most part, you guys are the nicest people on the planet. So I'm not expecting any kind of nastiness in here at all. So that's my opinion. And that's kind of the talking point for today's show. But the other thing that needs to be said, seeing as we're talking about being creative, the Christmas Songwriting Challenge that has been running for the past 5 or 6 weeks, the end of this show is the deadline by which you need to submit your final MP3 mixdown of your song. So when the credits roll, when Silent Night starts playing at the end and the end screen is up, that is your moment to make sure that you get that submission in, because after that, any submission submitted will not be accepted. We have to have a cutoff point. So the end of this show is the cutoff point. And then Monday and Tuesday, Rich and I will be listening through everyone's submissions, and we will pick a winner from amongst the submissions. And then on Wednesday's Songwriting Simplified show, that will be our Christmas show, and we will celebrate Christmas, and we will also announce the winner. So, by way of reminder, I am going to bring up the card for that. There you go. There's the card for that. So that is 6 p.m. Central Time on Wednesday, December 20th, is the Christmas special show, and we will do the announcement of the winner of the Christmas Songwriting Challenge for 2023 on that show. And then the next show to remind you about, after that, the next big event is going to be... Oh, that's the wrong one. Let me turn that one off. Where is it? Here it is. There we go. So the next one after that is going to be this one. This is the Hogmanay special. What is Hogmanay, I hear you ask? Hogmanay is Scottish New Year. All right, so it's what we in Scotland call New Year's Eve. So New Year's Eve is going to be 7 p.m. Central Time start. So that's 1 a.m. in the UK, 2 a.m. in Central Europe, and it will keep getting later the further east you go. So that is that, and that is basically just going to be a fun time where we will talk about predictions for music and music technology in 2024 and things that we would like to see for DAWs, for hardware, for other music software and music in general, where we think we will see, who's going to be the next emerging big name artist for then. So that is what that is going to be for the Hogmanay show. So that's going to be pretty cool. All right, I'm really looking forward to both the Christmas show on Wednesday and also the Hogmanay show on the 31st as well. It's going to be fantastic. I'm looking forward to drawing the winner. I'm looking forward to hearing all of your entries. I have deliberately not listened to a single one, just like I did for the Halloween challenge. I didn't listen to a single one, and I'm not going to listen to one until Monday. And I'm really looking forward to it. I've got my own song, which I'm going to unveil on Wednesday as well. And Rich, I think, has written pretty much an entire 15-song album of Christmas songs. So, yeah. So that's going to be that. It's going to be very, very cool. I'm really looking forward to it. All right. Let's see what you guys have had to say on the subject of work flu. Because I think it's an important question. And we got a question from Ron as well. I am going to get to just general questions like we normally do in just a minute. And actually, in his case, I actually don't know the answer to your question, Ron. I'm afraid. I don't really know, because that's not something that I work with. So and unfortunately, I don't have like external hardware keyboards. I mean, this is external, but it's not being used in that way. It's just routed with a MIDI cable into the back of my interface. So it works kind of normally with virtual instruments. It's not being used as an external synth in that sense. So I unfortunately can't really answer that question. And you're talking about in the editor window. Okay, we can take a look at that. So we got John Hathwaite says, something I've wondered about is a scratch pad. Scratch pad is very, very cool. We talked about that a little bit last week on Wednesday's show, where I basically described that basically the scratch pad is way, way, way down the timeline at bar like 3000 or something. And it's just a cool little feature whereby you can do a reworking or a rearrangement, or you can work on some additional ideas that you may not want to discard from your main song, but you might come up with like an alternative mix or a radio edit version of a song or something like that. That's what scratch pads are for. They are perfect for that kind of thing. Let's see. Just Bob says your work process, if it doesn't change, is not flow. Correct. If it is rigid and non-adaptive, you dinosaur yourself. You stagnate. You become non-supportive of updating. Yes, and learning. Yes, absolutely. My personal thing is that people that have those kind of things where they talk about X feature or Y feature or Y DAW or X DAW being a workflow killer. I would suggest that their assertion comes from a standpoint of arrogance, which I think is kind of what you're saying as well here. It's a good point. Dave Barstow says, if you see a dead skunk in the middle of the road, don't you drive around it? I do. That's a good question. Kind of. Sort of. We don't really get skunks here in Scotland, but if we did and I saw one on the road, yeah, I would not drive over it. I would drive around it. Why? Because when wildlife protection services come out, if people have been driving over the dead body of roadkill repeatedly, it makes it really hard to get it up off the road. And it means that sometimes the road has to be shut down for quite a while whilst they scrape up the dead body of the animal off the road. But if everyone went round it, then it would be much easier to get it up if it's only actually suffered an impact with a car once. So yes, you work around it. You don't just keep going saying, I'm going to blah, 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 blah. Or, to keep the analogy going, you don't go, oh, there's roadkill in the middle of the road, therefore I should stop. That thing is now my driving killer. I cannot move. It's done. Let's see. And as Carl observes, it's a free meal. Correct. Yes. Neil Thompson says, I've seen workflow most often used to praise Studio One when compared to other DAWs. This doesn't mean the DAW should be immune to any workflow criticism from paid users. No, I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about people that say, oh, this thing has killed my workflow. And by that, they generally mean it has stopped me being creative. Now, I've been using Studio One for 10 years. And before that, I used Cubase for pretty much 25 years. Maybe a little bit longer, because I started using Cubase in version 1, which is like 1988 or 89, something like that. So from 1988 or 89 through to 2013, I used Cubase. And then I switched to Studio One. And as it turns out, Studio One has enabled me to be even more creative than I could ever dared imagine. And, you know, yes, there were issues and stumbling blocks and problems with Cubase that frustrated me and annoyed me. Definitely. Did it ever stop me making music? No. It never did stop me making music. I made loads and loads and loads of records for myself and for other clients on Cubase. Loads. I've been involved in hundreds of albums. I've been involved in lots and lots of session work as a virtual remote session musician on Cubase. And when I switched over to Studio One, it's made actually doing what I do pretty much effortless. Yes, there have been, in previous versions, issues that have been a little bit of a stumbling block. Did they stop me being creative? No, they never did. I would find a way around it, or I'd find a way over it, or I'd find a way through it. And I basically will keep making music. And so that's why I don't understand when people, instead of trying to find a workaround or trying to find a way through the problem, you know, instead of focusing their energy on doing that and trying to solve the problem, they will take to social media and spend their energy there saying this thing over here has killed my workflow. You know what I mean? Why do that instead of just going, okay, this is a little bit of a problem. What can I do to work around that? How can I work around that? Can I find an alternative plugin? For example, let's say I've got a plugin that is persistently crashing. It's a compressor, right? For example. But let's say this particular compressor is just repeatedly crashing Studio One. Every time. Well, what's the solution to that problem? I could go to Facebook and say, this crashing plugin is causing me all sorts of horrendous problems in Studio One and it's killing my workflow, my mojo's gone out the window. Ah! Or I could go, okay, this plugin is obviously crashing inside Studio One. I know what I'll do. I'll uninstall that plugin and I'll use a different compressor and I'll move on and I'll keep being creative. And then when I've finished making my music, then I will go to the technical support team of the manufacturer of that plugin and I will make a support ticket and I'll give them the crash report. I'll say, hey, your compressor plugin is repeatedly crashing inside of Studio One. Here's the crash report. Can you please take a look? Meanwhile, I am still using Studio One and I'm using a different compressor. Studio One is no longer crashing. Everything is fine. And then eventually that software team will say, yes, we have discovered we can reproduce that crash as well. We'll take a look and we'll see if we can fix it in an update soon. And I carry on working and then eventually they release the update. I install the update. Everything is fine. That's kind of the point I'm trying to make, is to me that's kind of the that's kind of the flow way to keep going, rather than going and complaining about it on social media. And yes, you're right. That doesn't mean the DAW should be immune to any workflow criticism. And I'm not saying that Studio One has a perfect workflow. It doesn't. Why? Because no DAW does. No DAW has a perfect workflow. Each DAW has its own way of doing things, which is why if you have come from a different DAW, like I have, I came from Cubase to Studio One, it's kind of easier because, you know, the original design concept of Studio One was made by Matthias Yuan, who is a former Steinberg employee, who was responsible for inventing VST for a start, and also worked on Nuendo and Cubase SX. So very familiar with the Steinberg code base. And so, you know, some of that forms the basis of the workflow for Studio One. Obviously, he took some inspiration from what he was already working with when he built and designed what has now become Studio One. So kind of the change from Cubase to Studio One is actually pretty straightforward. However, if you're coming from another DAW like Pro Tools and you're coming to Studio One is like breathing completely different oxygen compared to Pro Tools, where things are very different over in Pro Tools land. And so you might instinctively, because you have habits, workflow habits that you've developed from working with that DAW, when you come into Studio One, you might be expecting Studio One, certainly initially, to work the same kind of way. You expect it to do the same kind of things. So you try and force Studio One to behave like Pro Tools. The problem you're going to encounter with doing that is Studio One is not going to work like Pro Tools, because it's not Pro Tools. It has a different workflow. It has a different way of doing things. Studio One is based around a concept of drag and drop. Pro Tools isn't. Pro Tools is click this menu, select that item, click this menu, select that item, click this menu to select that item, join those three things together, and you've created a bus channel. Studio One's not like that. Studio One is like, you just drag that thing, you just right click the channel and choose add a bus for selected channels. Job done. You know, it's very, very different. So, you know, you're right. DAWs should not be immune from workflow criticism, because every DAW can be improved from that point of view. Even Studio One can be improved from that point of view, but it shouldn't stop you making music. It shouldn't stop you creating. And I don't think any DAW or any plugin should ever kill your workflow. Because if your workflow is that inflexible that something like the technology brings it to a shattering halt or a complete stop, then it's not flowing, is it? You know, when you see a river coming up to a big boulder in the middle of its path, what does the river do? The river diverges and goes past and then rejoins together. It works itself around the boulder and keeps going. And so that's how I think our creativity should be. That, you know, even if there is like a big stumbling stone in the middle of the pathway, it should be like a river. It should just go, okay, no problem. We just go around it and we keep going. You know, a river doesn't go, oh, there's a big boulder in our way. We should stop and complain. It doesn't. It goes round and past the boulder. So I guess that's kind of the point I'm trying to make. Ron Figura says, creating music shouldn't be work. All other aspects could be. Yeah, I kind of inclined to agree with you there, to a degree. John Haythwaite says, one wonders if the people bitching about workflow are expecting some AI solution telling them how to do stuff. They might be, maybe. Kyle says, I try to find a way to have a repeatable process to make sure I do things that I've discovered that I need to have in place to make a good mix. Certainly. I'm not saying that having a repeatable process is a bad thing. What I am saying is that anything that kind of cuts in on that repeatable process shouldn't stop you being able to keep the process going. That's kind of what I'm getting at. But it's a good point you make there. Let's see. Wow, the chat just jumped massively. John says, sadly, I'm going to miss the deadline for the challenge. Work has got in the way. Oh, I'm sorry to hear that, mate. But in spite of that, I hope you have a great time making music during the Christmas period. Brett says, I agree. In the time spent posting that stuff, they could have found or written a macro or created a keyboard shortcut to fix their problem. Or something like that. Yes, for sure. You either find a macro that makes things easier. Now, macros are not the be-all and end-all. And macros depend upon available commands to make them happen. A macro is not a magic pill that is going to fix everything and make things that are impossible possible. All a macro does is take available commands that are performed by Studio One and allows the user to basically chain them together in a logical sequence so that basically you can trigger a series of events and a series of commands with one keystroke instead of, 4 or 5 keystrokes, just with one. So that's what macros do, and they depend upon available commands. If there is no command for something, then you can't make a macro for it. And that's where you kind of need to go, okay, this thing just doesn't exist yet. That's fine. Let's make a feature request, and then let's figure out another way to do what it is I want to do. Yes, all my times, David, for my shows are US Central Time. Okay, so 6 p.m. Central is when I normally do my shows, but the Hogmanay show is 7 p.m. Central Time, so it's an hour later. That's the only difference there. And we got Keith from Radio Tuck Trumpet who is here. Awesome, good to see you, buddy. Let's see. What do we have next? Chappie says, workflow. Can you show how to display downloads in the files browser? I cannot get it to show after my desktop. When you say downloads, what do you mean? Are you referring to Studio One sound sets or something else? Because that kind of depends. If you're talking about, some kind of audio file that you've downloaded or some loops from something like Looploft, yeah, they're going to be in the Files tab. So we're going to be over in Studio One and they're going to be in your Files tab. Now, I've already created a tab specifically for my Looplofts loops. You might not have done this before, in which case you go to the Root Files tab, and let's say you need easy access to Dropbox, because this is where all of your stuff is. Let's just say all of your downloads are being sent here. And you want to have easy access to that. Well, you right click and you go, excuse me, and you choose this option here, new tab from here. And once you've done that, you are good to go. And it will appear over here in this list of tabs. I've got quite a few, as you can see. Looplofts, Lipsham and Gybe, that's my shared folder with Jonny Gybe. But that's a neat little thing there that you can do. But if you're talking about Studio One sound sets, they are going to be in this folder here. So for example, if you've got some loops from Flying Solo, for example, then they are all here. So for example, you've got this one here. All right. So if you've downloaded something from Studio One Plus, like one of the loop libraries, for example, Flying Solo, then they are going to be in the sound sets folder. How do we get to that again? Let's go back. And let's go back to the Files tab here. And let's close that up. And let's close that up. So, Files, Sound Sets. This is where they will be. Now, you'll find that there may be, if you click on Studio One, you'll find that there's another Sound Sets folder here. And this one doesn't have anything in it. That's okay. This is the one that you want to be looking at here. and this is where I have mine. So for example, something out of bankrolls, for example, let's play this file. All right, totally different thing. But this is where all the sound sets stuff will be. So you should have complete access to your files system here, and you can go documents, and this will open up all your documents. If you click on volumes, this will open up all of your drives. So this is my C drive. Let's close up that. There's my D drive. This tends to be where all of my songs are. And then I've got E drive if I had a CD. And then I've got one of my external hard drives. And then there's my other one. This one's got lots of space on it. It's like nearly 4 terabytes there. So I've got plenty of storage space. But yes, so if you're not looking, if you've downloaded things to a specific location on a specific hard drive, then yes, you need to click on volumes. If you've downloaded to your user data location, then they will be here. Okay? So, for example, let me show you what I mean. I go to options, locations, user data, and then if I go sound sets, this is where they are currently being stored. Users, Jonny, Documents, Studio One, sound sets. This is the default location, but I've also got these other locations available as well. So I've got songs, sound sets, although there's nothing in there at the moment. These two are by default. These two paths are set by default. So users, Jonny, Documents, Studio One, sound sets, or users, public documents, personas, Studio One, sound sets. These are the two file paths that are set by default. So choose one of these, unless you're storing your sound sets on an external drive, like this one here, then you would select this path and then you'd hit apply and OK. And then anytime you download any sound sets from your My Personas account, they will get installed to this location here. And that location there is this folder here. So you can see all of my sound sets folders are all here, including the presence, core audio stuff. There's my Persona Studio Grand with its sound sets there. Then I've got these 6-string. These came from Studio One Plus. These are pretty cool. You know, these are great because I'm not a guitar player. So these guitar packs are really, really cool. If you need a tenor sax for anything, then there's all of these here. And you can construct a tenor sax solo just using a whole bunch of these loops. So I hope that that answers that question for you. John Hathwaite says, are skunks the US equivalent of haggis? Probably not. Haggis is like totally different, but that's funny. Let's see, what else do we have? Brett says, is there a keyboard shortcut or macro that you know of that would add a bus/VCA to a folder aside from using the drop down? That is, I don't, because I don't tend to use a whole lot of macros. So the thing to do is, if you want to create a macro that does that, you need to search the commands and see if there's a command available to use that. Then you can create a macro that uses that command. So if that's something that you want to do, that when you create a folder, it automatically creates a bus for that folder, then you need to see if there is a macro that will do that, a command rather. You need to see if there's a command that will do that. So you're going to have to search and see if there's, when you are in the macro toolbar, there is a search function there, and you can search for stuff and see if there is a command that is available, and then you can create a new macro using that command. And then you can put your macro into your toolbar at the top here. So, there's this action menu here that gives you a whole bunch of different things that are actually commands. So add a compressor, add EQ, add gain trim, copy and paste, deactivate and hide track, select parts between selection, set loop and zoom in, split at cursor. Align lyrics, markers, mirror notes, note selection, paste and trim behind, podcast, there's a bunch of podcasting ones there. There's some tempo ones here. So yeah, and this is, by the way, this is in the global toolbar that you'll find some of these. So you can have a look in some of these and see if something kind of pops out that will enable you to do it. And then you can see if you can assign that to a keyboard command, a keyboard shortcut, perhaps. But as I said, this is not an exhaustive little list of actions that can be done in Studio One. There are others, and you, like I said, you can look up different things here. You can create a new group. You can import different things. You can look at the macro organizer, and this is where you can search for stuff here. So you could say add bus, and as you can see, there is no macro for that. Yeah. So yeah, that's kind of how that works. Loudon Wainwright III had a song called Dead Skunk in the Middle of the Road, 1972. Yeah, and the Brecker Brothers had a song called Some Skunk Funk, which is an awesome piece of music. If you ever get the chance to listen to it, it's incredibly difficult to play. Let's see. Oh, chat jumping again. Let's see, I'm trying to see what else we have here. John Hazewitz says, as an IT support person in the film industry, most people, especially creatives, don't get technology and blame the last thing they looked at. Yes, they certainly don't blame the technology. Yeah, good point. Neil says, okay, I get it. What bothers you is the irony of complaining about workflow when the person's failure to be proactive is the biggest obstacle. Pretty much. That mostly summarizes it, yes. Maddie Singer is a Logic Pro X user. She sometimes cannot accept that something as simple as exporting stems is so much easier in Studio One. Yeah, ain't that the truth? Ain't that the truth? Billy says 2218. Yes, let's try and make that. What is it now? Let me go see what it is right now. What do we have? We got 20 just now, but we peaked at 26 at one point. Darn it. We lost a few people, but that's okay. So right now we got 20 and 19. It'd be nice if we picked up a little bit more, no? John Hazewitz says, macros rely upon the user knowing or being aware of all available commands. Read the manual as a glib answer, but there are loads of video resources. Yes, yeah. And if you are unaware of a command, or you're thinking, is there a command? Then, you can actually go search and see if there is a command in Studio One for what you want to do by starting to create a macro and then seeing if there is a command that will fit what it is you want to do. If you can't find one, if there is no command for it, then you can't make the macro for it. And yes, there are plenty of videos on macro creation. Lucas Ruziska has a brilliant video on creating macros, as does Gregor. Gregor has a really good one as well. Neil says, I was sad when the splitter tool was launched but not included in artist version. Rather than complaining on Facebook, I used a complex chain of buses, which I enjoy. There you go. You see, you found a solution. You found a solution that kind of works and does what you need to do to get what you need to get done. Yeah, Lockdown says downloads to the computer. Yes, it depends where you've downloaded them to. So if you've downloaded them, as I said, if you downloaded them to the volume of your computer, like a hard drive, then this is where you need to look in volumes. So when you downloaded it, you needed to make note of the path for whatever it is that you downloaded, where it was going to be downloaded to. Once you've done that, then you can find it. If it's on your C drive, it'll be under C users, and then you select your username, which is this one here. And then you might be able to find it there. If it's just a pure download, you might well find it in your downloads folder. Okay, I've got all of these folders here. For example, when I downloaded the MJUC, this is a long time ago, it downloaded a zipped folder. And then all I needed to do was unzip that folder, drag and drop it into Studio One, and job done. Or basically unzip it, use the installer, because there is an installer in that folder, and then it installs to the right place, to the VST2 folder, and then it shows up in Studio One. But if it's something like a WAV file or something else, then yes, you will find it in here somewhere. Pretty much in your download section. All right, so that's worth paying attention to. So if it's on your hard drive, depends upon which hard drive. Unfortunately, I don't see your computer, Chappie, so I don't know where on your computer it is or which hard drive it is. So you would need to do a little bit of a dig there. Okay, let's see what else we have. Dave Barslow says you can find that out in the browser that did the downloading. Just look it up in browser settings and you should be able to search it. Yeah, you can search your downloads folder. When you download something, generally speaking, the first place it goes to is the downloads folder. And then when you open the downloads folder, you find that item. So for example, in the case of when I did the video on the TENS Spring Reverb, the Klanghelm TENS Spring Reverb, basically I downloaded the installer for it. It went to my downloads folder. I located it in the downloads folder. I opened the folder and I double clicked on the installer. I ran the installer. I just followed all the prompts and then it was done. And then it showed up inside of Studio One. I needed to rescan my plugins. That's all I needed to do. And there it is. You know, it's in my effects tab of the browser just now. So if I scroll down a little bit, here are my Klanghelm plugins, and there it is, the TENS Junior. This one here is the VST3, and I've not created a thumbnail for the VST2 because I'm not going to use the VST2. I'm going to be using the VST3. So there it is, and I can just drag and drop that, and it works. Downloads folder not showing. Yeah, if you don't find the downloads folder inside of Studio One, you need to use Windows Explorer, or if you're on a Mac, then you need to locate the downloads folder in Finder, if you're on a Mac. So, yeah, so that's where your downloads folder will be. It's a system folder, basically, on your computer. It's not technically in Studio One. None of those folders are technically in Studio One, but you can access them from the browser, the files browser in Studio One. But if you're installing something into Studio One, like a third-party plugin, don't use the browser tab in Studio One to do it. Use Windows Explorer or Finder on the Mac and do it from there, because it won't work doing it from the Studio One browser, because it's not designed to do that. All right. So, Chappie is on a PC, so it will be on the Windows Explorer. So if you open Windows Explorer, then it should be here in your quick access section here, and you just click on downloads. There it is. And as you can see, I've got a whole lot of stuff in here. Okay. So you will find it there. And you should be able to look in that, should be able to scroll through that folder and see it. If you've got it in date modified order, so kind of like the most recent at the top, then it should be at the top. And then you can go from there. All right, but that's kind of where downloads are. They are in Windows Explorer, not necessarily in Studio One. Although in Studio One, like I said, you can get access to it. Bear with me just a moment. I'm just going to go off camera for just a second. And I'll leave you with reminder of when the Hogmanay special is. And the Christmas special coming up on Tuesday. Wednesday, rather. Sorry, my door to my studio was not closed properly. Okay, so I'm back now. John Hathwaite says you can also search for %sign downloads %sign. Yes, you can do that in the search box as well. And that will immediately open up the search bar for you. All right, so we got 4 minutes left of the show. And just by way of reminder, you've got 4 minutes left to get your final entries for the Christmas Songwriting Challenge in to the entries folder in the workspace. So if you don't know what I'm talking about, you're probably a little bit late for being able to do this. And I'm very sorry about that. But what I'm talking about is I'm talking about this here. And I'm going to turn my camera off just for a second so you can see everything. So this is, no, that's Johnny Guy's workspace. This is it. This is the Christmas Challenge workspace here. And you will need to upload your file to this folder here, the entries folder. And it looks like we've got 24 entries in here. Make sure that you mark your file with the song title and the word final in capital letters at the end of it. So if it's Carol of the Bells, you do Carol of the Bells final with your name, obviously. Otherwise, we're not going to know whose Carol of the Bells it is. So, for example, if your name is Billy Morgan, you would do Carol of the Bells final Billy Morgan. And then that way we know that that's your entry. And then make sure it is an MP3 mixdown of your song. Make sure you set the markers correctly so that you have the start marker at the start of the song and at the end, and then you export between the start and end markers. That way we make sure we get your whole song exported correctly. So make sure you do that. Make sure you title it properly with your name and everything there as well. And you've got 2 minutes left to get your final entry into this folder here. Once it's in, then you're good to go. And me and Rich will take a listen to all the entries on Monday and Tuesday. And then on Wednesday, we will be back here for Songwriting Simplified, the Christmas special on December 20th. That's Wednesday at 6 p.m. for the awards ceremony, I guess you could call it. We will listen to our favorite entries, and Rich will play one of his, I will play my one, and then we will announce the winner. And the winner will get a prize. And if you win, you will need to reach out directly to Rich Cresswell, and he will help you organize your prize and where it needs to go to and all of that. So this challenge is very, very wonderfully sponsored by Rich Cresswell. This is the second songwriting challenge that he and I have done together very successfully. Actually, I think this is the third, because I think we did one earlier last year. But this is, yeah, so this has been a really successful partnership. A big thank you to Rich Cresswell for all of his support and for enabling these challenges to happen. It's been really exciting working on these. Yes, I know it literally says uploaded by, but you know, when we actually play the files, we need to be able to make sure that we don't mix up whose is whose. That's the whole point. It's called double protection, John. That's what we're doing. To make sure that we have the right name for the right file. So if it's in the file name and as well it says uploaded by, that's great. But, you know, when we're playing these, we want to make sure we play the correct ones. All right, so that's why I'm asking for that extra information. So that's the explanation for that, John. I hope you understand. But that's it, folks. We are out of time for tonight's show. Billy is going to launch an after show. And we're going to help Chappie discover where his downloads folder is. It should be fairly straightforward. He should be able to find that and get whatever is downloaded on his computer available to him in Studio One or whatever it is he's trying to do. So until then, folks, I will see you all on Wednesday for the Christmas special, December 20th, 6 p.m. Central. It should be a celebration of Christmas and everyone's creativity. It should be an absolute blast. And then after that, folks, we have the Hogmanay special on New Year's Eve at 7 p.m. That's 1 a.m. UK time. The reason why it's 1 a.m. and not the usual time is because midnight is when we cross over into 2024 here in the UK. So I'm allowing an hour for me to be able to celebrate with my wife and my kids. And then we will do the celebration show. And it is just going to be a celebration. So bring a bottle of beer or a bottle of wine or a bottle of champagne, whatever your favorite beverage is, or a bottle of Coke or whatever it is going to be. And we will enjoy celebrating together, and also have a think about your predictions for maybe Studio One, or maybe Persona's hardware, or maybe just the music industry in general for 2024. That would be very exciting. All right, folks, let me get back over to here. And I will bid you all a very good night. Good night, everybody.